How do I prove discrimination at work? In order to prove discrimination at work, you must collect sufficient evidence to convince the relevant party that discrimination has occurred. The types of evidence that will convince a jury are different than the types that will convince your superiors in the office. Even so, it is best to collect the most convincing and comprehensive forms of evidence possible no matter where the case will be considered. More generally, in order to prove discrimination at work, you must also prove that the discriminatory actions had negative effects on your person. Not all areas recognize discrimination in the same way, so making sure that the discrimination you experienced is actually illegal is also important if you wish to take the case to a court. When trying to prove discrimination at work, the most important step is collecting and preserving evidence. This is the most important step because if the case boils down to the accounts of the victim and the perpetrator, it can be very difficult to win the case. Evidence comes in many different forms, from witness testimony to emails and memos. Making a file that organizes all the evidence is a good way to preserve your future options and help a lawyer build a strong case. You must be sure to prove not only that the perpetrator in question was of a discriminatory mindset, but also that he or she acted on that mindset. For example, it is not enough to prove that the perpetrator holds racist thoughts. He or she must act on the racist thoughts in a way that has physical, monetary, or social effects on the world. Simply holding discriminatory thoughts is not usually enough to constitute discrimination at work. Depending on the type of discrimination, it is sometimes more difficult to prove discrimination at work. For example, hiring decisions are often complicated and depend on many factors. Even when a case might seem to be discrimination from one perspective, it can be honorable from another. Discrimination that takes the form of harassment is much easier to prove, particularly when the harassment can be documented. When trying to prove discrimination at work, it is important to be sure that discrimination has actually occurred. If, for example, you feel that you have been discriminated against because of your age but it turns out that the problem was actually experience, you can be at a disadvantage in the future in your job. As such, it is very wise to approach collecting evidence for a discrimination case very discreetly. Discrimination is a serious problem, and all cases of discrimination should be prosecuted, but it is important to protect your interests should you change your mind about the case.